Extreme heat is no longer just a seasonal discomfort. It is a crisis unfolding silently across the world. Now, scientists warn that climate change is driving record-breaking temperatures, leading to illness, deaths, and overwhelming pressure on essential systems. While floods and storms grab attention, heat waves remain the deadliest and most overlooked disaster. Lives are at risk, and the question remains, what must be done to confront this challenge? This is The Conversation. I'm Darshan Usman. Let's talk. Climate change is making heat waves more intense and frequent around the world. Now, over the past year, about half of the global population experienced at least one extra month of extreme heat due to human-caused warming. Now, these prolonged hot spells are called a silent killer, since fatalities often go unrecognized or are blamed on other health issues. Remember, during the deadly heat wave in Saudi Arabia last year, 1,300 people died, while Southern Africa's worst drought in a century left 21 million children malnourished. Extreme heat is also disrupting daily life, especially in South Sudan, where schools were closed for weeks when temperatures surged to 45 degrees Celsius. Now, to protect lives, experts have actually recommended simple steps like keeping track of dangerously high temperatures, opening cooling centers, and making sure that workers have breaks and hydration when it's very hot. Updating building rules to improve ventilation and creating emergency response plans for heat waves also helps. But the long-term solution, they say, is reducing greenhouse emissions, or even heat waves will only just get worse and continue to harm vulnerable groups everywhere. Now, joining me on the conversation this evening, we have Desmond Majekodumi. He's a climate change expert in Lagos. We also have Daniel Oladoja. He's a climate policy analyst with me in the studio here. And also Rabiu Abubakar. He's CEO, Ozone Layer and Climate Change Incentive from Kaduna, Nigeria. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for...
All right, let's begin with Desmond. Now, Desmond, scientists have actually warned that temperatures in Africa could rise up to twice the global average rate. Just how is this extreme heat manifesting in the environment?
Well, we've been warned from way back. In fact, the first alarm started blowing about 40 years ago when they saw the effect of adding too much CO2 into the atmosphere. And that CO2 in our atmosphere is just one of the many, many miraculous proportions of different elements that are operational in this earth, in this particular case, our atmosphere. Because the CO2, which is carbon dioxide, which is one of the gases that comes off when you burn particularly fossil fuel, it traps a little bit of the sun's heat. But if you have too much of it, then you're going to trap more heat. And this is exactly what the scientists had observed several decades back. And they started warning people, but a lot of people just denied it and said, oh, forget it. It's just one of those natural things. The earth gets hot sometimes. And it continued getting hotter and hotter and hotter until we got to 2015, when the whole world leaders, they get together every year under the auspices of the United Nations, and they actually signed a treaty to reduce the CO2. And after signing the treaty, the CO2 continued to go higher and higher. And in 2024, the levels of carbon dioxide, which causes the heat in the earth, have never ever been higher in recorded history. And by the way, the earth had never been so hot as it was in that 2024.
Okay, well, even in Nigeria, we've experienced so much heat this year, and we are still experiencing it. Now, let's come back to you, Daniel. Let's hear your thoughts on, how the extreme heat is actually impacting the lives of people in Africa. Are rivers and lakes visibly shrinking? What is actually happening?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'd like to, I mean, your introduction was very succinct, by the way, and it kind of covered everything. I'm just not happy with the fact that you missed out on a very vital event in Nigeria last year. And it was across sub-Saharan Africa. There was critical overshoots, unprecedented levels of heat across the globe. But there was an event last year. You asked me what has been happening. There was an underreported case last year of heat wave. Of course, we all felt it. There was noise everywhere, Lagosians, everybody talking about it. But in Adamawa State, over 200 people were reported dead in a space of 2 weeks, just due to extreme heat. It got to record temperatures of 40 to 45, I think in some places 50. Things they've never seen before. And what happens when you begin to have those record number of temperatures? My organization, in partnership with Nigeria Climate Innovation Center, did a report earlier this year where we looked critically at what this means for Nigeria. It's the fact that first you're going to have expansion of the water system because now it's getting hotter. And this is Lagos, right? And I'm grateful you brought the legend himself. He's here to talk about it. He has studied the expansion of the coast and the fact that there's serious coastal erosion happening because the water volume is expanding due to heat and all of that, the absorption of heat. And this is ongoing. We're talking about stressful nights. And what is alarming about this is the fact that going forward, I think for last year alone, there were close to about 190 hot nights in Nigeria alone. That number is set to go to about 200 nights. How many days do you have in a year? 365.
Right.
Now you're talking about 200 hot nights. And we're not talking of hot nights when your fan can do you service. We're talking of hot nights where it's unbearable, people cannot sleep. In the Adamawa case, people were slumping and dying in the hospital while waiting for treatment, right? This is, and that is why... If you
complain about Adamawa, I can only imagine, how hard or how hotter it was in Borno State.
Absolutely. Adamawa was the one that was reported. Nobody talked about Borno State. But if we move away from the north, come down to Lagos, the conversation everywhere, online and offline last year, was people, and the funny thing about Nigerians is we joke about everything. People would say, oh, who went to hell and leave the door open? But that's people trying to tell you that this is becoming unbearable. Extreme heat means a lot to me because I remember in 2005, I was writing my SSCE, and while preparing, I could not go home until very late in the evening because it was hot, extremely hot. But the sad thing about temperature and heat waves is that every year since 2005 up till 2024 has been a record-breaking year for temperature. And where we are right now is, we're talking about this year, we've crossed the threshold of the 1.5 degrees Celsius that we thought was like the no-go area. We're not crossing this. Now we've crossed it, and people are now beginning to talk about the overshoot or the overreach and what can we do at this level. And the implication of this is, the thing about heat waves is it doesn't just affect your sleep. It affects the preponderance of diseases, right? And I say this everywhere I go, that the bacteria that cause human diseases love it hot. They love it hot. Mosquitoes, bacteria, fungi, viruses, they love it hot. So the hotter it gets, the more active they become. So you're talking about sepsis and some other diseases just exploding everywhere because these microbes are now free to do more work and do more harm, right? You're talking about decrease, and it's not just for humans. I'm an agriculturist by study.
Livestock as well.
Livestock and plant diseases will also explode. So you're talking about traveling on the verge of famine because of just one factor, heat. You're also talking about mental stress that this will put on people because people will be less functional than they've been. And we're seeing it. Everyone is talking about food insecurity, but we're not tracking back to all these variables.
We will actually get to that. Let's talk to Rabiu. Rabiu, listening to what they have actually said, both of them, we know that reports have it that in Southern Africa, heat and drought have actually become critical. Since we're focusing on Africa, for example, the Lake Kariba's water level fell so low that hydroelectric dams failed, causing massive power outages. Now, can you explain how intense heat is putting pressure on water resources and energy supplies in these regions?
Good afternoon. When you talk about
hello, sir. Do you mind removing your earpiece so we can hear you well?
getting in. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Let's talk about heatwave. Heatwave is a very serious issue, as the last speaker said.
Hello, sir. You need
Thank
to
you.
remove your earpiece. You need to remove your earpiece so that we can hear you.
Here in Nigeria, we get issues for granted. Are you hearing me?
You have to disconnect your earpiece. You have to disconnect your earpiece. Okay, so while he does that, let's come back to you, Desmond. Let's hear your thoughts on, I just shared an example of the Lake Kariba where water level fell so low that hydroelectric dams actually failed. Explain to us how this heat is putting pressure on water resources and energy supplies in these regions.
Oh, it's putting terrible, terrible pressure on every type of resource because the average heat of our planet has been quite constant for centuries upon centuries upon centuries. We've had, little variations, but there were little variations. As our brother Daniel, as he said, it's only recently that we've broken that particular heat variation mark. We've gone over 1.5 degrees centigrade above the average temperature of this Earth. And if you look on the Earth like a massive, complex organism and refer it to your body, if you have a 0.5 degrees centigrade rise in the average temperature of your body, you're not feeling too good. By the time it gets to 1 degree in your body, you know there's something wrong with you. By the time it's 1.5 degrees, you are sick. And if it goes up to 2 degrees, you might lose your life. And that's what's happening. That's what we're doing to our planet. It operates on a specific average temperature. In some parts it'll be cold, in other parts it'll be hot, but generally the average temperature is there. And because of the massive amounts of pollution, we're causing this heat. And of course, we in the tropics will feel it a lot more because it's quite hot here anyway. So rivers will dry, lakes will dry, all kinds of problems will happen in the agriculture sector. And as our brother said, it's going to affect people's health as well. But it's a bit of a silent killer because it's not as if it's just going to knock you out, as if, big flood comes, you drown, you're gone. In this case, it builds up on you. It builds up on you on different parts of your metabolism. After a while, maybe you're going to have some kidney issues or some heart issues or some liver issues. And also it gives you a lot of mental stress because your body is also designed to operate within a certain external temperature, which is what we are going against. And it's a huge alarm call. It's a wake-up call to humanity that you have gone too far down this road, which is why at that 2015 conference that I was referring us to, where all the world leaders came and they said they're going to reduce the CO2, the Secretary General of the UN, he made a statement and he said, mankind is waging war against nature and this is suicidal. He used that word. He said it's suicidal. What we're doing against nature is suicidal against our civilization, against humanity. And the reason he gave, he said, nature always fights back. And she's doing so with vigor and fury. The reality is we are making some very, very dangerous mistakes and forgetting that there are fundamental laws that govern the universe, that govern in the physics and in the metaphysics. The laws of action begetting reaction. What you sow is what you reap. And what we are sowing into nature now, we are already beginning to reap the reaction of that because the earth is definitely going to give it back. Fundamentally, we're breaking these laws and we need to wake up to that reality very, very quickly. This heat wave situation is something that we all need to take into cognizance. As you said, waters are drying out. What are we going to do? But at the same time, it's causing the opposite effect. because you have more heat, you're going to have more evaporation of the larger water bodies, and you're going to have heavy rainfall. Even in the middle of the heat, you'll have heavy rainfall. I'm sure if you go back to Niger State now, once that rain cloud has passed away, they'll still be feeling tremendous heat, despite the fact that they had a type of rainfall that is unprecedented, and they never expected, especially in that particular location. We are paying a very, very heavy price for the negative.
Let's hear from Rabiu. I'm told that he's okay now. Rabiu, can you please say something?
Yeah, how are you? Good evening.
Yes, fantastic, Rabiu. So, tell us, why is Africa heating up faster than many other countries or continents?
Come again?
Why exactly is Africa heating up faster than many other regions?
Of course, yes, Africa is heating higher than other regions because we still not to take all the measures in place. Like virtually, let me take an example of Nigeria. Nigeria has been participating in virtually all the climate regime, right from Kyoto to Paris Agreement, Kyoto of 1995 to Paris Agreement of 2015, and up to the Kigali Amendment. But the unfortunate situation that we don't take all the measures discussed and all the far-reaching agreements, we never take them serious when we come back to our own Nigeria. So we seems, as one of our speakers says, we seems not to take things for serious. When you talk too much, they say, this is just a scientific belief, but it's not reality. Of course, you can see one of the major answer to that question. We fell trees every now and then, and we never care to afforestate our forests. We keep on, cutting down the forest, giving way for expansion of our farms, or giving way for urbanization, giving way for road construction, which is all defined as development. But anyway, when you just cut down a tree, it is expected that you can recoup back that tree with 3 different number of tree species, which will help in absorbing the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. For as long as we have carbon sinkers like the trees, certainly we will be able to follow the trend, and the African sub-region will be cooler as expected. But we don't give down, particularly here in Nigeria. You will see so many government with so many policies. They will just declare a forest area that, okay, we want to expand our cities and thereabout, so nobody cares. And even the building standard, we're supposed to have what we call a kind of green roofing. And all these green roofing, they are not conformed. They are there to serve as a sinkers. They help in controlling carbon sink. But we don't give it down. So, and we keep on cutting the trees, burning charcoal, and these are not things that you can find in other regions. And in Nigeria, of course, we don't give down to that. So I think if we should be able to call a spade, certainly the African sub-region, particularly here in Nigeria can be colder than any other region. And one happy thing you should understand about these heat waves, and when we come to that in the subsequent, I will tell you more about my take about what I think Nigeria should do. Nigeria being the giant of Africa, if we should do the right thing at the right time, certainly most of the African nations will copy from us. But I'm sorry to say that in Nigeria, we went to Paris, we went to Copenhagen, we went to Dubai recently, Azerbaijan. All this is what we call the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, whereby issues of global climate temperatures and climatic change and variation in climatic issues are being discussed. But when we come back here, most of these things end in papers. The reality of it is that Nigeria has what is called Green World Project, where we will now plant millions of trees across our own borders and to help as windbreakers, and at the same time to serve windbreakers to checkmate the encroachment of desert, and at the same time to help in absorbing our carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. But I don't know what's happening now. It's like the issue is a little bit silent or underfunding, I don't know. But certainly, if we should be cooler than any other region, as you asked, we should abide by the rules and regulations and the far-reaching decision taken there in the UNFCCC.
All right, now let's hear from Daniel as well. Daniel, would want you to tell us, because farmers, they say, are at the forefront of this particular crisis, right? Can you speak to us on how this is actually affecting crops, soil fertility on the ground? Are we beginning to see signs of this emergent crisis, you know, in markets or even in food aid rolls and all that?
Yeah, crop failure is one very, very clear symptom of heat waves.
You can include livestock as well.
Exactly. Sorry, I am biased to crops because
fine.
I'm an agronomist. But of course, you do that. You do everything for 4 years and then in final year. And the truth is, both the crops and the animals feel the brunt of the heat waves, right? Because in the ecosystem, there are like microbes and both nutrient circulation and distribution in this. So if you start from the life cycle, right, and you look at the fact that healthy faunas and healthy floras will give you healthy animals, right? So if you're not producing enough good crops, right? Take for instance, forage and feed and fodder for animals and all of that. If you're not able to, let's say there's extended period of drought, which means that the pasture is dry, that would lead to significant reduction in the health of livestock. In Kenya, for instance, there have been severe conditions of droughts where livestock have literally collapsed and died on the field because of extreme heat, right? For plants, you would notice wilting and all of the crop failures, and all these things will lead to food insecurity because aside from just activities of microbes, everything in life is driven by water, right? So there's increased evapotranspiration, right, and evaporation, which will mean that the water escaping from the plants and escaping from the animals, and the thermosystem is completely disrupted, and these things begin to literally fall off and die. I mean, you would go to the farm without proper irrigation systems, acres and acreage of farm and crops would just die. I mean, there was I'm not sure where, but there was a situation, yes, there was an initiative that was done by one climate experts in the north, sometimes last year. It was an intervention, a livestock intervention, where they were trying to support the community with poultry, right? And, you know, they did everything from hatchery, and just after hatchery, when the birds were at that very fragile state, the heat wave struck, and they lost about 50% of the birds, right? Now, we're talking about that because it involved a climate scientist. There are scores of farms in that region that would have had the same record number of deaths that they would not be able to explain simply because of increase in temperature, right? So our food system is really at risk because of extreme heat.
So what agricultural adaptations or even policies are needed? You know, because you talked about food security, definitely this heat affects food security as well.
That is a very huge question, but I'll do my best. The first thing we need to understand is the fact that we are at a geographical disadvantage. We're on the equator, right? And the equator has historically been hotter than every other part. And that's why you talk about the tropics. So we cannot move ourselves away from this belt. We're here, we're stuck here, geographical disadvantage. But what can we do is we need to first of all accept the fact that we are at risk. And because our entire natural balance is being distorted, unfortunately, while all of this is happening, we're talking about global historical emission. I've always said that the West is to blame. But now 60% of global emission is coming from Africa and the developing countries. So it's like we're fueling the fire that is burning us. So we need to begin to reduce our emissions. There are also severe deforestation. Nigeria, for instance, is #1 in terms of global deforestation. So the heat we're feeling is because we're also reducing the forest cover. So we need to begin to think about rapid, accelerated afforestation. We also need to begin to talk about adaptation in terms of how we design our houses, how we live, how we transport, how we move about. And there's the system we're putting in place, like cooling centers, especially in the urban areas. We also need to begin to think, because the heat waves are not going to get better immediately. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And that is because it's only going to get better if we take deliberate steps to look at what we can do. But now you've asked about agriculture and the food system. We will need to invest a lot in irrigation. Our cropping system would also need to change. We would have to start thinking about mixed cropping and, you know, maybe using tall crops to protect the arable ones, so that we reduce evaporation and all of that. We'll have to think about maybe increasing mulching systems. We would have to rapidly invest in a lot more irrigation systems.
We will definitely, speak more on this, but then we need to go on a quick break at the moment. When we come back, we'll continue with this discussion. Do stay with us. Waves and its impact on Africa. We already have our guests still with us. We have Desmond, we have Daniel in the studio, and also Rabiu. Thank you so much for staying with us. Oh, all right, now let me come to you, Desmond. Desmond, there have been remittances to sub-Saharan Africa, hitting a record $56 billion in 2024. How can African governments better channel this flow into productive investments rather than simply consumption?
Investment is pretty straightforward. I think the first thing, though, is that we really, really have to come to terms with what we are doing and why we are doing it in reference to creating the climate change. It's an aberration. The reason why we're having climate change in the first place is simply because of generally humanity's greed and selfishness and desire to just take care of me, myself, and I. Massive corruption is a result of this. And the reality is that if funds are there and we don't change our attitude, the funds will not be deployed as effectively as they need to be deployed. And believe you me, these funds need to be deployed very, very effectively and rapidly because we're having an emergency. Again, I refer you back to what the Secretary General said in 2015 at that conference where he told everybody that we're actually waging war against nature and it's suicidal. He said it was a crisis at that time. And we ratified this treaty. We agreed. Our president was there at that time, President Shagari, presidents of all the countries of the world. We agreed. We're going to reduce this CO2 emissions. But when they got back to their home countries, people started realizing that it could have an impact on their profits. This thing is going to reduce the profit margin, the mighty profit margin that everybody is worshiping, that we put ahead of people, that we put ahead of planet. You got to make the money, you got to have the profit. So they didn't follow the agreement that they had ratified. And he said at that time, he said it's a crisis. In 2024, as we continue to have 1 year hotter than the last year, so we had the hottest decade, as my brother, very knowledgeable fellow there, Daniel, has told us, hottest decade in human history. In 2024, they have this conference every year. He surprised the people there because he said, well, ladies and gentlemen, it's no longer a crisis. People were quiet. He now shouted out to them. He said, it's an emergency. And why have we reached this stage of it being an emergency? Simply because the monies that should have been spent were not spent in the right way, and also because we were too worried about reducing our profit margin. So the solution actually can only come if we, as human beings, we as Nigerians, as Africans, as inhabitants of this earth, if humanity decide to have a renewal of their minds, have a change, because basically and fundamentally, nature is obviously, just fed up with the way human beings have been behaving for hundreds, thousands of years, doing all sorts of crazy things against each other, developing technology mainly so that they could have more power, more effective war, using bows and arrows in those days gone by, and then using gunpowder and just developing the technology mainly because they felt, well, this will give me more dominance, this will give me more power. And we've been practicing this negativity against ourselves for so long. But because we're doing it against nature, And she is a force that we cannot win over. Okay. She's fighting back. So for the money to be effectively deployed, well, our hope and our prayer is that people who are going to have access to any of these type of funds will use it very, very responsibly and be wise. Again, remember, there are fundamental laws governing life.
All right. All right, let's hear from Rabi. Rabi, there has been talks about, shifting to renewable energy for a really, really long time now, but, it keeps getting worse. Scientists have actually said that cutting fossil fuel use, would actually, if we don't cut it, it would actually worsen the heat wave and also climate change. But we're not seeing a lot of Africans, cutting fossil fuel and all that. For African economies who are still relying on coal, oil, or even gas, how reliable or how realistic is this shift to renewable energy?
Thank you for this question. I think I'm very happy to hear this question from you because I'm also into energy. I'm an energy expert. Certainly, we are gradually moving to renewable energy, particularly solar. But as I have said, and as the former speaker said, if I can be able to figure out from what he said, is the issue of corruption. When we have a kind of basket from the global CC and any other committed body, we here in the Africa, we have a problem when it comes to really accessing money for renewable energy. So if you tell an average man in the village, okay, fine, don't cut trees, why don't you go to gas? Today, gas is shooting up. The price of gas each and every day keep on shooting gradually. People have left kerosene, because kerosene is becoming too expensive. So they make the price of the gas to be a little bit cheaper. So people now are moving to gas. But eventually, the price of the gas keep on higher and higher. And even after the current policy by the current administration for removing subsidy removal, I think the price of the gas also shoot up. So people have no other alternative, particularly the vulnerable group, people that are living from lower income earning. They have no other alternative if they cannot afford a cylinder of gas, or about let's say 10 kg of a gas to cook for a week and have some heating and some domestic services for a week. They feel like going back to firewood, charcoal, and what have you is still cheaper. So they have no alternative than to run back to the former tradition of going back to the firewood and coal. You see, so government are now, I can say government are not longer helping matters. If really government wants help matters, one they have to subsidize the price of this gas to make it very, 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 very affordable for a common man, And of course, the transportation system, fine. The government have a presidential initiative recently that we have to go for CNG, compressed natural gas, so that we should stop using public transport or any kind of means of transport using gasoline or petrol or naphtha or diesel, so that we will not be able to send the GHGs, that's greenhouse gas, to the atmospheric space, where it will tap the escape of infrared radiation and invariably will return back to us. And
but there are also concerns of the CNG vehicles exploding. Don't you think that the heat would exacerbate, the compression?
One thing I have to say there is very, very important that the government should stick to their own policy. That is, okay, if government really, they want to cut down the emission of the CO2 and to achieve the desired target of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change that says we should do as well as we could, not to shoot away from 1.5 degrees centigrade of the global average temperature, then government should incentivize the prices of alternatives like cooking gases, like solars, like biomass, like biodiesel, bioethanol, as a means, also to give a kind of means how people can access this funding even at a local community to have their own kind of production capacity of all these biotechnology, of biogas and biothings, stuff like that. It happens in India. India is not any way, with due respect, is not in any way better than Nigeria. And so many other countries like Rwanda. Rwanda is nowhere when we are talking about Nigeria. But in all these small countries, issues of renewable energies are working, and they are working fine, fantastic. And most of them, they are living to their own target commitment of trimming down global average temperature of below 1.5. But in Nigeria, when we went to all those new FCCC conference, and when we are back home, government seems to remain adamant. So I think the nonchalant attitude of government to really incentivize the local community is what is causing all this problem.
All right.
One thing you have to know.
All right, now let's come back to the studio and speak with Daniel. Daniel, how important is it to invest in early warning systems? You just cited example of the flooding that happened in Niger State, and I did speak to the permanent secretary, on humanitarian affairs about if the early warning system, there was an early warning system, and if it worked and all that. So how important is it to be able to give information beforehand, for people to be prepared for whatever heat would be coming?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think early warning systems are imperative and they're useful. There was an initiative we tried to work on last year around early warning systems, but we realized that it was going to be a lot bigger than what we could pull off alone, and we had to maybe leave it alone. And I think the early warning systems we have right now, they're useful, but they're not comprehensive, right? Elsewhere, take for instance the California fires or any fire in the US, the wildfires, or maybe tornadoes or cyclones. When the early warning systems come or the alerts come, governments get involved in evacuation. It's not just enough to blow the alarm. You have to get involved in evacuating people. So the early warning system is one thing.
So they have helicopters that lift people.
So evacuation is another thing. 3 is welfare and relief systems and camps, right? IDPs and all of that. How comprehensive is our warning? So all we do here is NIMET will just come and tell you it's going to be windy or hot over the next couple of days. Rain is going to be really heavy over the next couple of days, and there'll be flood. If you live in flood-prone areas, move. Where do I move to? Where do you move to? So we wait until the flood has chased people out of their houses before we then tell them, okay, you can come to the stadium. We've made batches and all of that and booths where you can stay. No, that's not how it works. We need to be more human in how we design our relief systems, right? So if there is going to be floods, right, if there will be flooding, warn people, then set up an evacuation system. Then create a structure for the people who are leaving their houses. Where do they go while the water is high? And create that relief system that helps them survive that phase and then return them back to their house after the flood. And then that means that you're not just warning, you're getting involved in everything in between, from before the flood, during the flood, and after the flood. All we do here is stock up before the flood, minding the fact that poverty is at a record level here. Government cannot just warn people. Government have to follow people from before every flood and through every natural disaster. What I mean is government have to follow people through every natural disaster and help people survive, not just survive, thrive, and then return back to their houses. That is how to talk about it. So it's not just about blowing the alarms. That won't do anything. The reason why a lot of our early warning systems fail is because people actually don't have anywhere to go to. So you're telling people water is coming, where do they go, right? If you're going to warn people, don't just warn them. Create systems and structures that they can fall back on and still have some semblance of normalcy, and then go back after the hazard has actually occurred. Other than that, we're just wasting time. Nobody's going to listen.
All right, well, let's hear from you, Desmond. Now, in situations where, the government has not done anything, they've not warned, they've not prepared and all that, what can people do? What can how can ordinary citizens prepare themselves for the hottest season?
This is so important. We're part of a system, and the leadership is supposed to be guiding this system based on the needs and the desires of the people. That's why they have been elevated to a position of leadership. And if we don't get it right in terms of letting the leaders understand the job description, they are all civil servants. I know there could be quite a few who wouldn't want to hear that, servant too well, right? But that's the job description. That's what you've been paid for, to serve the people, to serve the needs and the desires of the people. So one of the ways for us to prepare for what is coming, and I'm so sorry to say this, as Daniel alluded to it, worse is coming. If not this year, and if not next year, it will be within the next few years because of the trajectory of the polluting gases that are creating the extra heat. It's not just going to go away overnight, although if we do things very, very quickly and ensure that the pollution is stopped, that Africa comes together, Nigeria comes together and leads the way at the next international conference and ensures that the necessary funding to do the right thing for us to be able to adapt, for us to be able to mitigate. These funding comes to the vulnerable countries like Africa and some of the South American other countries and island nations. Yes, we can get some kind of traction, but the leaders are the ones who are going to utilize these funds. And as I alluded to earlier, they need to wake up to the reality that if they don't do this, and if they are in some way responsible for bringing about this catastrophic destruction, catastrophic consequences, because that's where it is leading to. Again, I refer to the Secretary General at that 2024 conference. He said, we're heading towards climate hell. That is like we're going inside a bus towards a cliff where the bridge has gone down and our foot is still on the accelerator. And the reason why that is the case is that the leaders have decided, well, they just want to continue, maintaining the status quo and making the good money in our businesses and not deploying the funds the way they're supposed to be. Those days are over. Oh, yes, this is an unprecedented time in humanity's development. And believe you me, scriptural injunctions are going to come into play. If we cannot follow basic scriptural injunction in the Holy Bible, we're put here as stewards of creation. In the Holy Quran, we're referred to as caliphs. And they also tell us very clearly about the retributive justice that will be forthcoming. Kifara, karma, that will be forthcoming upon those who don't do the right thing. So the people who gather together, make sure your leaders are truly following the job description and serving the people. And if they can't, then they must be changed. And if enough of us come together, it'll be a peaceful process. It's down to the numbers, but it's also down to the unity, the coming together of humanity to bring about this wonderful, wonderful change. Likewise in Nigeria, for us to do that. One of the quick ways to at least alleviate it a little bit is stop cutting so much trees. Bring green back into your space. If you have a garden, make sure you're planting trees and plants in that garden. If you don't have a garden and you have a balcony, make sure that you have potted plants. If you don't have a balcony, at least on your window ledge, let's bring the green back into our green nation, our great green nation, Nigeria. There's a reason why. Our flag is green.
Absolutely, Desmond. Now, while we wrap up, let's hear your final thoughts, Rabiu, in just briefly.
Hold on, thank you. I want people to appreciate the fact that about this early warning. if there is early warning, there has to be early commitment by the government. As they inform the resident or the community that, okay, social calamity, weather, flood, or whatever, or wildfire is coming. So the government should also do their best to give a response to early commitment, meaning to have a kind of alternative, in terms of evacuation, in terms of IDPs, and whenever these IDPs should be temporal, as soon as the calamity is over, then government should also make a kind of peak response to relocate people back to their own place or habitation. And on the final note, before we run off the discussion, I want people to appreciate the fact that all the kind of insecurity, like the other speaker says, who says a top scientist, all this kind of insecurity, apart from food insecurity, we have also economic insecurity, which brings, it's a multiplier effect, which brings insurgency. People should know that even the Mohammed Yusuf, known as the Yusufiya movement, is as a result of climate change. Because when the church water volume shrinks with more than 1.5 million liters of water daily, the fishermen over there and the youths over there have no job to do. They are all fishermen that are living in a very good glory, pure to climate change. But when the lake church shrink, Mama Yusuf started his movement, so he found it easy to mobilize, utilize, and recruit all those youths into his own forces and start destabilizing the security there in the northeastern part of the country. So, so all this Boko Haram is also part of the climate change and global issue.
And I read somewhere that farmer and header clashes as well, it can be part of, might be part of climate change and movement as well.
Yeah, even the headers farmers crisis is part of the global climate change. So as a matter of urgency, people should, government should live up to their expectation and should make easy way for people to access if there's any climate basket, how they can go into tree planting campaigns and and stuff like that, and also to subsidize any alternative like the cooking gas that I'm talking about. Because if there is a great subsidy in cooking gas as it were,
Rabi, sadly, so sorry about it. Sadly, time is not on our side. Would actually have to wrap up now. I wish we had more time to discuss this. I'm sure you guys, would have obliged us, but we'll find time to speak more on this. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Desmond Majekodumi, climate change expert, Daniel Oladoja, a climate policy analyst, and Rabiu Abubakar, CEO Ozone Layer and Climate Change Incentive. We appreciate you for your time and for speaking so in-depthly and passionately about this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, and with that, we wrap up today's episode of The Conversation. Do not forget you can catch up on all missed episodes on our YouTube channel at News Central TV. You can also watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, GoTV channel 23, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Until next time, I'm Darshan Usman.